Hello everybody and welcome back to Red Eagle Politics. Make sure you guys like this video down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. So there were some special elections last night and they did not go in the Republicans' column. In fact, the Republicans won some of them, but even the ones that they won, they still underperformed in all four of these races, and one of them specifically we'll be talking about, which was in Iowa, where the Democrats went out there and they ended the Republican supermajority in the Iowa Senate with a 20-point overperformance from 2024. Donald Trump won this district by 11. It went red in 2022, but now it went Democrat by 9 percentage points. So this is definitely something that is raising a lot of eyebrows. You have the people that are on the left saying there's going to be a massive blue wave. You'll have people on the right that are saying that it's not great for Republicans, and they say it's proof that Trump is losing popularity or that the midterms are not going to go very well for the Republicans. And I wanted to analyze this in this video. Do special elections really matter? Because Democrats were winning special elections all throughout 2024, and they got utterly decimated on election night, and they had really not a lot of fundamentals working in their favor, so they would cling to things like special election results and the Washington primary, which, again, didn't really tell us anything. In fact, Washington as a state was the state that moved the least to the right. So if anything, that would prove that if it was useful, it really wasn't useful for the rest of the country. So regardless, do special elections matter? We're going to cover that because, again, I've talked a lot about how Democrats are dying as a party, and they are. This does not change that. There's a difference between the micro and the macro. And when you have 7,000 people showing up, and they all tend to be the people that view voting as their religion, these college-educated white liberals, and you have a strong Democrat running against a weak Republican in a district with a good amount of ancestral Democrats down ballot, this type of stuff is going to happen. It will. Now, in 2026, it's probably going to flip back. But again, we have to look at the big picture. Kim Reynolds is not a popular governor in the state, not popular among independents or Democrats. So if you're going to show up for something like this, you probably don't like her either, and you're going to kind of have a state-level motivation to turn out for this thing. Also, the Republican candidate that ran and won in 2022 got more votes than the total number of votes that were cast in the special election. So you didn't even have half of a midterm level turnout showing, and you want to extrapolate for what it means for 2026 or 2028, you can't do that. Also, Democrats overperforming in most special elections pre-2024. That's also important to note. And you also had a strong Democrat running up against a Republican who had a lot of statements on abortion that were extraordinarily viewed as outlandish by your average Iowa voter, even your average Trump voter. Keep in mind, the Rust Belt is not as religious as the Deep South. They may be open to some abortion restriction depending on how you market it, but if you're going to go out there and you're going to say that you don't want any exceptions, and that's a part of your platform, that's going to hurt you, especially with low turnout. And it's kind of been unique as a phenomenon. Since Dobbs, Democrats have been able to uniquely capitalize even more than they already were capitalizing on these special elections. So that's a major problem. If the Republicans actually ran somebody who was, just a normie MAGA type of Republican, they would have won. They probably would have underperformed because it is a special election, but I think that they would have been able to win. Again, the Republicans did actually outspend the Democrats here, but I think it was just the fact that the Republican candidate was just not really electorally strong based on the baggage that he brought to the table. He said that 9/11 was fake. This is a guy who the average voter is not going to want to give a lot of credence to. So you have to understand that. Also, seat probably does flip back, and we see this phenomenon. So again, Republicans are the party of these low propensity voters. In Iowa, they're voting heavily Republican, but for a special election, they're the least likely type of demographic to show up. There are some places in the country, like certain parts of Georgia, for example, where we've seen Republicans overperform in special elections, because those college-educated white voters in certain parts of Georgia, not all, but they do tend to be more Republican friendly. We saw another election take place in Georgia where that was not the case, and you kind of did see the fact that the Democrats overperformed a bit, but it was a primary and Republicans still combined for more votes. They'll probably win the runoff. And then you had an election in California where Democrats overperformed by about 5. And then you had another one in Alabama where it was deep red. They overperformed by 4. But I really wouldn't look too much into that because turnout definitely plays a role. And I think Republicans need to engage their voters better and get them voting. And also they need to understand where the center of gravity is on key issues. It's not just about, we're going to have the old Republican platform from 10 to 15 years ago, but we're going to say that we like Trump. That's not enough. I mean, you have to, I think, you don't want to antagonize Trump, but you have to take on the reasons why people like Trump. Things about the broken system, draining the swamp, make America healthy again. You'd have to talk about issues like protectionism. The party needs to, become a little bit stronger on immigration. It has come a long way under Trump, but there still is a massive disconnect where they need to actually embody the movement completely in a presentable manner that is authentic, that could deliver the party election victories. We've seen people do it, over the years. Glenn Youngkin winning in Virginia 2021. He had a perfect storm going for him, but I mean, it's still a 10-point overperformance from the previous election. So definitely, there's a lot the Republicans can do to win elections with lower turnout. You also need to have more competent state parties. That's another thing. So there's plenty of reasons why there are these underperformances, but does it mean anything for 2026? Not necessarily. We've seen this graphic right here that shows that this is a unique level of underperformance. But again, I don't know how they're quantifying the 2017-18 shift because, again, the special elections that we saw there in the House, which tend to be, less prone to massive shifts, were a D+20 overperformance. And then they went back more to baseline. So I'm not sure what this really is getting at here, other than the fact that over time, Republicans have become more and more of the lower propensity party, and it's hurting them. And it's also important to note that in regards to 2024, a lot of those Republican overperformances that made the whole, Democrats only overperformed by a few points, now they're overperforming by 13, they came on the same day as a contested Republican primary. For example, in Minnesota, there were a few races that Republicans were going out there and winning by 30 points more so than Trump won the districts by 4 years prior, but that had to do with relative turnout more so than anything else. But I would rather be the party that competes in midterms, wins in presidential years, than the party that does the opposite. They could overperform by 50 points in a special election with 10% turnout. It's not going to mean anything when the people actually show up to vote and they vote Republican, either for Congress or for president or whatever. There's a massive, massive disconnect. And even before 2022, you could look at some of these House races that we saw, talking about these overperformances. You had this district here, Texas's 34th, which was a swing district where Mayra Flores ended up winning. But again, the propensity dynamic kind of played a role because not only did she, get a decent amount of those, Trump voting Hispanics out, a lot of Hispanic voters in the Rio Grande Valley just didn't show up for that election, and she did well because of the white voters in that district, which vote heavily Republican. And you look at Nebraska's 1st district, this was, I believe, the first one after Dobbs. I think this was largely due to the previous conviction of Jeff Fortenberry, though, where Mike Flood won by 5 points, and then it went back to baseline. He won by 15 that November, which wasn't the greatest year for Republicans, but that's a 10-point underperformance there. And then Jim Hagedorn, he passed away, and then you have Brad Finstad that's taking his place there. He ended up winning that district by 4 points, and then it went back to baseline, and he won it by double digits that November, and then I think he won it by even more in 2024. That's Tim Walz's old district. And then you saw the Democrats, they overperformed in Alaska. Some of it was because Palin's a polarizing figure and is not as popular as she was when she was their governor in the state. But you look at her underperformance, that's like a 13, 14 point underperformance. And then New York's 19th happened and the Democrats won that district. And I think that the underperformance in the 23rd was even more egregious, where they only won by 7. I think this was a much more heavily Republican district, but Republicans underperformed. And New York, they had a massive, massive red wave in 2022, one of the few states they did. So again, it's not even indicative of midterm years. You look at 2017, for example. Mike Pompeo's district, this was like a 20-some point underperformance for Ron Estes. It went back to baseline. Greg Gianforte, when he won this race right here, that was an underperformance of like 15 points, and he was just fine. The 6th district in Georgia is a rare exception because this midterm or a special election electorate, I should say, was more white and college educated. And college educated whites in Georgia down ballot still voted heavily Republican in 2017. They still do, but not by as much. So that helped Karen Handel. And then the 5th district in South Carolina, you see an underperformance there. It was like, again, another like 15 to 20 point underperformance in that district. Then Utah's 3rd, that still, I believe, was an underperformance, but it wasn't like seen as that egregious. And then you get to 2018, where Connor Lamb defeats Rick Saccone. That's like a 20-some point overperformance. Debbie Lesko underperforms by 10 points in the Arizona's 8th special. I'm not entirely sure what the makeup of the 27th district in Texas was, but the 12th district of Ohio, that was a massive underperformance for Troy Balderson. And then I believe the next election that you saw, he went out there and he won by the normal margin for a Republican in that district. So special elections do not necessarily indicate that your party is in trouble. Or even though in 2018 that they did, it still went back to baseline. And in 2024 and even 2022, in the general election, they still went back to baseline. So Republicans do need to stop sleeping at the wheel because, again, they lost their supermajority, and that's not a good thing. But I don't think it really means much other than the fact that turnout could be the Republicans' Achilles heel in 2026. Because when you look at when less people vote and less people vote in a midterm, that typically is benefiting the Democrats. It used to be the opposite 10, 15 years ago, but times have changed and Republicans need to find ways at engaging voters and adapting. And I think if they do it a little bit better, I actually think Trump in the White House could help if he campaigns for the midterms in certain places, assuming that his approval rating is still in the high 40s, maybe even low 50s by then. Who knows what happens on the economic front between now and then. But still, the underperformances have little to nothing to do with him and just the fact that Republicans need to get voters to turn out. Because this has nothing to do with persuasion more so than it has to do with turnout. I mean, you look at Wisconsin's Supreme Court race. We saw that earlier this year. The Democrat-aligned candidate won by 10. But again, it was like a D+7 or Harris +7, I should even say, electorate that showed up. And even though Republicans spent a lot of money at the end, it was not spent efficiently to the point where it mattered. So anyways, guys, thanks for watching this video. Like this video down below, comment down below, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications so you never miss another video. Follow me on social media. The links are all in the description down below, and I will see you guys in the next one. Red Eagle, out.